Good morning, everybody. My name's Tony Holmes, and today we're going to be talking to a couple of subject matter experts about tech fluency and how we integrate our students into the workplace. So according to Cengage's 2022 Graduate Employability Report, graduates are skeptical about their education's contribution to career readiness. In fact, the report showed that only 41% of college degree graduates believed their education was a good indication of the skills they possessed. With graduates skeptical of higher education in terms of workplace readiness, it's more important than ever to make sure that we prepare our students for the workforce. Today, we're joined by two experts from universities that Pluralsight has been working closely with. Dr. Lynn Adams from Utah Valley University and Dr. Kyle Feuz from Weber State University. And we're going to discuss how universities can leverage tech fluency and tech skills to prepare students for today's job market. Dr. Lynn Adams is the Department Chair for Strategic Management and Operations and a tenured Associate Professor of Business at the Orem campus of Utah Valley University. He has over 30 years of administrative and managerial experience, 8 years as Mayor of Heber City, 12 years of college business management teaching, 20 years of political leadership, 12 years as a business owner, and 6 years as an Army aviator in the Guard. Welcome, Dr. Adams.
Good to be here.
Dr. Kyle Feuz is an associate professor at Weber State University in the School of Computing and currently serves as the department chair. Dr. Feuz earned his PhD from Washington State University under the guidance of Dr. Diane Cook in 2014. He received his BS and MS in computer science from Utah State University in 2010 and 2011, respectively. Dr. Feuz's research interests include machine learning, artificial intelligence, computer security, and computer science education. Dr. Feuz, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
Okay, before we get started, I'd like to cover a bit of housekeeping. First of all, we'd encourage all of you to use the QA feature at the bottom of your screen. There's going to be time for Q&A in the final 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar. So go ahead and ask your questions throughout as they come to mind. If we don't get to all the questions today, we will prepare a Q&A doc after the event and get that sent to you. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'd like to get started. So welcome, gentlemen. If we go forward with the premise that students are skeptical of the ability of higher education to prepare them for the workplace. First, as with all discussions, I think it's important for us to define our terms. So what does workforce readiness mean to you, and how does it impact your role at your institution? And Dr. Adams, I'd like to go with you first on that.
Well, this is what keeps us up at night, isn't it? Having the peace of mind of knowing that what we're teaching our students is exactly what industry needs, and that we're not just teaching them a set of isolated skills that aren't going to help them when they get into the job market. So yeah, this is the crust of our job, that we are able to produce a product, students, the graduates that are ready for the job market. Interesting,
thank you. And Dr. Feuz, what do you think about the workforce readiness? What does it mean to you and your university?
I think, historically, universities maybe weren't seen as preparing students for the workforce, and that's where some of this skepticism may come from. But universities, and Weber State in particular, recognizes that that's no longer the case. Universities need to be at the forefront in preparing students for the job force. I was in a curriculum meeting a couple weeks ago at the university level, and every new degree that was being proposed, the first question that was asked is, how is this going to prepare students for industry? Do you have letters of support from industry partners? Do you have metrics to show, right, that this is going to lead to workforce readiness? And so it really is becoming forefront in universities' perspective of how can we prepare students for workforce readiness.
We're seeing it the same way, exactly. Those discussions are always in curriculum meetings, and we have to provide job numbers and placement that we expect in a degree or new program or even a class, depending on what it is.
Yeah, that's actually really good insight. And something I often hear from industry is that many organizations, when they talk to us, they talk about a graduate requiring 1 to 2 years of vocation before they're what they call work ready. So often when I mention this during discussions, I get a lot of people from higher ed beating up on me for criticizing academia because I'm outside of academia, obviously. So I guess I think one of the things that I'd be really interested in understanding is, first of all, is this the kind of thing that you're trying to get ahead of, this concept of graduates needing more vocational experience before they can be applied to the workplace? And secondly, potentially the mindset of the people that do attack you for kind of making this assertion. And sorry, I'll put that to Dr. Adams again first, if you don't mind.
Oh, geez, if I was in front of a bunch of professors, I'd get stoned for saying these kind of things too. But in some ways, we have been behind in the past. One of the things a college education does provide is a breadth of knowledge, and hopefully that breadth of knowledge, if we do it correctly, provides adaptability in our students that they can be put into any situation and adapt to it. But at the same time, the things that we teach have got to be up to date, that they've got to be what industry expects. And I think in many of our programs, I'm sure both Weber State and Utah Valley, we're really trying to get students so ingrained in their industries that the adaptation period isn't as long. That's really we're trying to get them the skill sets they need, but also the ability to adapt as soon as they're in the workforce, and perhaps that they're already in the workforce during their college years in internships and other things, projects, so that it's not a surprise as to what they're doing when they get there.
We really want our students to have the tool sets that are being used in industry and have some of those skills. Obviously, each business is going to have their own unique set of skills that they're going to need. So there's going to always be a need for some workforce training. But like Lynn's saying, if we can provide the breadth and provide that foundational skill set to minimize that time to onboard once they are hired into a position.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. I know colleges are proud of their ability to promote and teach critical thinking, creative thinking, but as you correctly point out, these have their places. It's only relevant if you can actually secure a position where you can apply your critical and creative thinking. So I think that's an insightful comment. So thank you, both of you, for that. So I guess this is where tech fluency and tech skills come into play. They help them secure those roles, help prepare them for the workplace, as you've already mentioned. So moving away from workplace readiness, what does tech fluency mean to you? And, can students be ready for the workplace if they aren't tech fluent is I guess, my next question. And Dr. Feuz, if I could push that to you first. Yeah.
When you think about tech fluency, a lot of it depends on your audience of what that term really means. We partner with our community education center and provide some tech training to English language learners. And for them, a lot of times tech fluency is the basics of using a computer. They may not have a computer in their home and may not have developed some of those skill sets. Whereas if you're dealing with, college graduates or soon to be college graduates, they've been using computers through most of their education. And to them, tech fluency is more about learning to talk with the rest of the business, right? So if they're in the tech side, Can they talk to the business analyst and describe what they're doing at a technical level, but in a way that the business analyst can understand? And so that's some of the, tech fluency at all different levels.
That's interesting. And I think that's when you talk about communicating fluently with business analysts, that falls right into Dr. Adams' wheelhouse. So Dr. Adams.
Yeah, and in our realm with business, we run into another problem, and that is the breadth of what tech fluency even means, because businesses are so different in how they do their analytics and their technology. There's just such a variation in the programs they use, in the technology they use, and it's getting bigger all the time. One of the surprises for us is that our students that are coming up out of high school, who we thought were really technologically fluent, are actually much more narrow than we had supposed. They're really good at social media and a number of other things, but as far as skills that relate directly to business, they're not there. So we honestly have to treat them as if they're kind of new to it, in a sense. And so that presents one problem. The other problem in tech fluency is that for us is, where do we concentrate on for our business majors? Because we're hearing so many different ways to go in this. So where is the great core in tech fluency that we need to go towards and that we can teach all of our students? And that gives them enough of a base to, again, adapt.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it sounds like tech fluency is a subset of workforce readiness that kind of crosses all degree disciplines, that I think I heard from both of you. So, for me, again, that speaks to that breadth of knowledge that the university brings to us, helps us, address these real world challenges. And it reminds me of a quote by the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, when he said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my mind," which I think is an interesting kind of thought around the subject. So I guess moving on then, so we understand what workforce readiness is. We understand from your perspective what fluency is. So what are you, both of you, currently doing to address tech fluency at your institution? So how have you implemented, and I guess this is kind of one of the things that a lot of the people are here to see is how your institution has implemented that tech fluency program. And Dr. Adams, I'd love to hear from you first.
Well, we're more new at this than Weber State. They've been partnering with Pluralsight for some time, and our relationship with Pluralsight over the last couple of years has been exactly that. We're trying to explore how we're going to get technology into the hands of our students and how to do it in a faster and more efficient manner. The big problem in my mind, and this, I don't know if this is going to answer your question or not, but the thing that worries me is getting my professors up to speed, because let's face it, we're dated in a lot of ways. So my concern is, how am I going to keep my professors up to scratch in the programs that they need to understand and know, so they can do data analytics or statistics or whatever it is, and keep them there. It's going to require 10 to 20% of their time roughly every year just doing that. So in this partnership that we're partnering with Pluralsight and some others on different fronts, that's what we're really trying to do, because I don't see any way to deliver to the students and create the student product that we're after without getting the professors up to speed first and keeping them there. And they honestly cannot keep up with the content that's coming out of the technology world. They just can't do it. There's too much of it. It's changing too fast. So I'm throwing two more problems at you. Sorry about that, but
no, not at all.
That's kind of where our thoughts have had to be on this. So, yeah.
I think that's really relevant. And you say that they're moving too fast, and there's lots of indications that many tech skills today have a half-life of about 2.5 years, which means if we have our tech skills growing exponentially, but our ability to learn remains mostly linear, that's a huge problem. And it's certainly something worth talking about for sure.
Yeah, so the hope is that we would be able to keep our professors up to proficiency using these kind of tools, and at the same time offload the huge load of creating new course content that quickly, having to redo classes with technology in them constantly, which is what they're going to need to do to stay up, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So Dr. Adams pointed out, Dr. Fates, that you're an old hand at this. So I'd love to hear about how you folks are implementing this over at Weber.
Yeah. So we have been partnering with Pluralsight for several years. I think we're going on maybe 8 years of our Pluralsight agreement. And we found that to be a valuable tool in promoting tech fluency among our students. I think, Dr. Adams, your university is deploying this university-wide. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're in the process of doing that. So 10,000 licenses.
Yeah, so we haven't been able to get quite that level of buy-in at Weber State, but in the School of Computing, we really value, right, the Pluralsight partnership that we have, and so we deploy it at our department level and leverage this partnership to again provide licenses to all of our students. And what that does, kind of like Lynn was saying, is it lets us offload some of the content creation on topics that are difficult to keep up with, and say, okay, we know we need to be teaching source code management and Git in our classes. Industry has come to us and asked for these skill sets. And so rather than us create modules for this, we can just bring them into our class and say, you know, we're going to be using Git. We don't have time to teach you all of the details of Git, but here's a Pluralsight module that can bring you up to speed so you can use it in our project class and collaborate with in your group and team and take advantage of this resource and get real world training, right? This is the tools you're going to be using out in industry. At the university level, you know, when I say they haven't quite bought into this, they have bought into the need for tech fluency. And so we have a digital learning center that is sort of the central place for this digital fluency or tech fluency, but then it has different spokes out because tech fluency looks different in computer science than it does in arts and humanities. And so each program has the ability to kind of customize their own needs of supporting this digital fluency effort.
Well, and ours was a little different. Ours started in the business school, but it was at a department level. My department kind of led out in this. We were the ones that wanted to try this out a couple of years ago, and it's worked for us in the same way. But now our engineering school is taking this on, and so they're going to be probably the main push. But it's also being used by our administration, trying to get the skill sets of our bureaucrats here at UVU up to scratch and figure out how they're going to stay up to date. Because although many of them use cutting edge programs, the way they see it and the way they use those programs in some ways is still archaic. So it's kind of a three-prong approach here, continuing ed, regular ed, and then the administration side at UVU. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and how it helps, what it looks like in a couple of years.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's great insight. Thank you. So with that in mind, can you talk a little bit about how you're seeing cross-pollination of tech subjects in degree courses? I know, Dr. Adams, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but you know, I'm very interested in, you know, one of the things that we talk about is that potentially all organizations these days are tech organizations, whether they realize it or not. So I think it'd be interesting to understand how they touch in degree courses that are traditionally non-tech focused. And although you just mentioned it, Dr. Adams, I'm going to go to Dr. Fates first on this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You know, we're seeing a lot of cross-disciplinary needs, especially in, you know, computer science, software engineering being used in multiple disciplines. And so, you know, recently we've partnered with our business school and math programs and created a data science discipline, right? Where we need the business analytics side of things, we need the math and statistics side of things, and we need the programming side of things. And all three of those have to come together to create this data analytics program, right? And then keeping that current and up to date is going to be a challenge going forward, and maintaining those cross-disciplinary relationships. We're very siloed at the university. It's rare to reach out to other departments. And so overcoming some of those barriers and challenges is an exciting opportunity for us and for our students.
Yeah. And Dr. Adams, are you seeing something similar?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We used to call it math creep because math had creeped out into the disciplines, and we're still seeing that. And so our math department has shrunk as the main math courses are taught within the disciplines, the higher math courses, and engineering and other fields as well. But even in a bigger way now, the creep is faster towards technology creep and the sharing of different programs. Many of the same programs that Dr. Feuz is using, we're using as well, although we're not teaching programmers, we're teaching data analysis using those programs. So the focus is a little different. We're not trying to make programmers, but we're very much using the same programs, the R's, the Pythons, the SQLs, all that stuff. There is a lot of overlap.
That's fascinating. So, and I think it's one of the things that people don't realize quite so much. So I guess, talking about that, and again, Dr. Adams, you touched on this earlier. How are you driving the adoption of tech fluency at the faculty level and at the staff level?
Well, we've provided licenses for them. We're encouraging the rewrite of key classes. We have been successful in our basic data analysis courses. They all have Pluralsight within them. There's a core of about 4 classes that's in our traditional business degree now, and we've completely rewritten our business degree, and it has a new name now. But the old business degree has really been gutted, and data analytics is now at the core of it. And those 4 classes, especially the upper division ones, Pluralsight was designed into those courses from the get-go. They're just starting to fill. We're just 2 of those classes. One's just started, and the final one doesn't start until this summer. But that's where Pluralsight's front and center is, in those courses. It's the key content for the programs in those courses.
Yeah, that's useful feedback. Thank you. So given that, what feedback are you hearing from industry on graduate readiness? I guess more importantly, how does that impact the further development of your programs and understanding, how to respond? Because obviously, one of the things that we hear from academia is that changing a course, I use the analogy is like turning an oil tanker. It takes a lot of space and a lot of time. So that's probably the second part of the question. What are you hearing from industry on readiness, and how does that impact how you respond with your programs? And I'll go to Dr. Feuz first with that.
We definitely value the feedback we get from our industry partners. We try and meet with them on a biannual basis and circle back and talk about what we're doing in our programs and what they're seeing with our graduates and where the gaps are. And then we come back and try and figure out how can we fill those gaps. And like you were talking about, Tony, in academia, it's difficult or a slow process to create new programs and entirely new courses. And even existing courses, it's not a time-consuming process to change a course, but it's a challenge to find ways to fit new content in when there's still value in the old content, and you only have a fixed number of weeks to cover the content. And so that's where that industry feedback is critical in prioritizing what skills are we teaching And we're not going to be able to teach them all. We talked about this earlier. You know, every industry has their own specific needs. Oh, we need you to teach them Python. We need you to teach them C++. We need, you know, this is the language we use. This is the database we use. And they're, you know, obviously when you're talking to them, they're going to want their stuff prioritized. And then you talk to the next business and they're going to want their stuff prioritized. So we listen and we, you know, send out surveys and stuff and try and figure out what technologies are going to best prepare our students for the workforce. But ultimately it comes back to building that foundation and that ability to learn and pick up new skills so that as they enter the workforce and adapt to their new environment, they're able to come up to speed quickly.
I totally agree with that. And let me add something that we're seeing. We haven't had graduates in our new business course. So our later data analytics courses are just starting to get students now. But what we've seen, something we've not seen before, and that is in our basic data analysis course, we've had a huge number of students, way more than we've ever seen before, say that they've either gotten a raise at work or a new job. The vast majority of our students, and I think Weber's are the same, are at least working part-time the whole time they're in college. So we've not seen this before, where a specific course just suddenly gets as many students a raise or even a new job at that basic of a level. So we know, at least at the basic level, it's resonating with business. And we'll see, we'll have to wait a couple of years and see how industry reacts to it. But that's what we're looking for, like Kyle and their team have been doing for some years. We're going to want to hear what industry echoes back on that.
That's an interesting take. And also, I guess it's not just industry, but I think, you know, another important part of the feedback is obviously the feedback from graduates. So, you know, continuing that same conversation, I'd be interested to understand how you formalize the feedback from graduates to ensure a better experience going forward for future students. And Dr. Adams, let's go with you first on that.
This has been kind of a university thing where they do a survey and they try to get a significant number of students, after, 5 years out after they've graduated, to, take a survey and tell us what their experiences are, what their salary rates and other things are, and how they see their education at that point. But that has been really hard to do, let me tell you. We were able to survey our students right as they're leaving the door very effectively, because that's kind of a graduation requirement, right? But 5 years out, 3 years out, it's much tougher to get, and to get it in enough numbers that we really have a statistically significant sample and we know we're getting a good view of what's going on. You tend to get students replying, or former students replying, that are either doing really well or angry, one of the two. We don't have a good idea what the breadth and depth of our graduates is once they get into industry many years out. And frankly, I was the same way. I didn't respond to stuff from my university after 2 or 3 years, especially the ones that wanted me to donate money, right? But what's your experience, Kyle? I think yours is pretty much the same, but
we see very similar types of things. We're able to collect that data from our graduates, when they're fresh out of the program. But at that point, they don't have the industry experience to reflect back upon. And so the feedback's not as valuable. But then 5 years out, when the feedback would be more valuable, it's harder to get those students to respond. Going back to our industry partners, sometimes that sort of secondary feedback mechanism provides a good gauge. When we hear, oh, we love to hire graduates, we want more of them, they're fitting perfect into our program, that kind of feedback reflects well on our graduates in our program and lets us know if we're headed in the right direction. But yeah, if we could get that sort of 5 year out, what are our alumni saying, that would be a gold mine.
Yeah. Same here.
That's interesting. I'd like to take a step back, if I may, because I've got to the previous question, because I've got a question from one of our attendees. And I guess this is probably aimed primarily at you, Dr. Adams. In revising the business degree, what, if any, content did you drop to create room for the new additional analytics content?
Well, we had redone our core some years ago, so I didn't have to redo the basic data analytics course. The 2400 was put into our course several years ago by the dean at the time. They saw that we needed that. We dropped a legal course over the years, and there was we went from 2 accounting classes down to 1 and 2 econ classes down to 1. And then we picked up the data analytics courses. That's kind of how it was redesigned. Most of that was done before. I was the one primarily responsible for getting the new business degree through, and it was just approved last fall. Made it all the way through. So yeah, and that's kind of an ongoing thing. What do you chop? Because you know that if you don't get certain skills repeated at least 4 to 6 times in 4 to 6 courses, like in programming, they're not going to learn it well enough. But at the same time, so you've got to repeat certain things enough, but you still want to get that breadth as well. So that's kind of a balancing act. We've had to refocus. I know Kyle's mentioned that you're refocusing on the things that are the most important and not trying to provide everything. That makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the approaches we took specifically with that data analytics was genning up a new program, right? So that students who want the more traditional business focus can do that.
I think Dr. Feuz has frozen. Hopefully we haven't lost him.
Yeah, so, sorry, I think I cut out there for a second.
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
But our data analytics program is sort of hybrid, right? And so students get to choose where their focus is, and they can choose from among those programs which direction they want to head.
Yeah, that flexibility within the analytics is really important within the programs. Yeah, I agree. Our degrees, in that respect, the degrees from a number of universities, and I could tell Weber State's the same way, the kind of degree you graduate with is a lot, it can vary quite a bit, and it can be very customized to what the student wants. And these kind of mini certificates within Pluralsight and other systems work very well to that. One of the things we've leveraged with Pluralsight, this is kind of a little off subject, but we are able in many classes to take a beginning score and a final score in a system like Excel. First of all, they get a good score they can put on a resume and say, I'm at this level in Excel or Python or wherever. But for AUCSB accreditation and other things, we're able to say, this is where they came into the class, this is where they left. We can show what they're gaining within a course or a series of courses.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And one of the subjects I did want to touch on, if we got time, was this whole concept of micro-credentialing and kind of forging your own path through the degree. So hopefully, you know, we'll be able to come back to that in a second. But one of the other things I wanted to talk about, because we focus a lot on faculty and how we teach, I think one of the other things I want to focus on is if your text fluency programs have impacted either student retention or student recruitment, and how you promote those to potential students that are looking at your college, at your university. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be awesome. And I'll throw that open. Whoever wants to go first, I don't mind.
Go ahead, Kyle.
So we see it in helping our recruitment and retention efforts, being able to advertise our high job placement rate because of students' workforce readiness. Right? That's a huge draw into our program. When you come in knowing you're almost guaranteed a job, right? If you complete the program, that's a good selling point. And we have those kind of job placement rates, and we have that kind of workforce readiness. and students come in knowing that and want to stick with it because they can see at the end, right, the reward. And then, you know, like Lynn was saying, a lot of our students, they don't even have to wait to the end. They're getting their associate's degree and getting a job and working part-time or full-time and student full-time or part-time. And I don't know how they manage it, right? Their lives are so busy with work and school and family, but they're doing it. And, you know, having that, being able to advertise it and let students know about the tech fluency skills they're gaining definitely helps with our recruitment and retention efforts.
Yeah, and what he mentions as far as what industry's craving for, that's a really good measure of how good your program is. If your placement's that high, you know what you're doing is at least resonating with them. Again, because we were just getting started with this the last couple of years, one of the things we have seen, though, I worried about how many students were going to be drawn towards that data analytics course, that first business analysis course. The first semester we launched that course, we ended up with 18 sections, which is higher than our normal number of sections. Usually at most we'd get 13 sections in a core course. The next semester we ended up with 19 sections, and here we are a year after that. We're still at 19 sections, and we've had to increase the number of students per section. We tried to keep it below 30 the first year, and now we've got sections 40, 50 students, and we've still got 19 sections. That we thought there'd be pent-up demand and that it would go down to some reasonable level, but it's just stayed high. So I think the students have reacted to this. I think they're acting rationally and saying, I know I've got to have this data analytics skill set. That's kind of early on, but that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I find that fascinating. And you know, on top of that, I'd like to just spend a little bit of time coming back to touch on the point, because we've still got a few minutes left before Q&A, to touch on the point of micro credentialing, or this concept of people being able to kind of plot their own path through their degree to whatever is most relevant to them. Can you talk to me about, you know, how that's influencing you and how it's changing the way you approach it? And I'd like to go to you, Dr. Adams, first on this.
Well, we've been encouraged for some years to get credentials, to get stackable degrees for one thing, which we've been successful at mostly, and micro credentials in the skill sets that industry is asking for, the specific programs, Excel, R, SQL, Python, Tableau, you know, data visualization, those kind of things. And the scores coming out of Pluralsight are a good foundation for that. At least you have a score. That's kind of a micro credential right there. Very much is. A new thing we're seeing, though, is that we can use Pluralsight, if we use it carefully enough, we can get students to a point where in a course, if they desire to, they can test out at an expert level. If we do that correctly. We're working on that right now, but that's the desire. And that costs, I think, like $20 to proctor that, but you can take I can't remember what the exact name of it is for Excel, but a high level accreditation from Microsoft. We're trying to figure out the logistics of that, of doing that for a lot of students, but we think we can at least teach to that level that those students that want to take that can take that. We're also creating other credentials, certificates. We've got a data analytics certificate that we offered in the Learn for Work program a couple of years ago, and we're still offering that. We're trying a variety of things, and in different departments, they've got a whole bunch of different ways they do these kind of credentials, these certificates. And so we'll see how this fleshes out in the next few years, but we're definitely well down that road.
Yeah, and Dr. Feuz, over to you with that same question.
Very similar to what Dr. Adams mentioned. You know, in our traditional academic programs, we're using stackable credentials, so students can, you know, start with a certificate that leads right into their AAS, that leads right into their BS, that leads right into their master's degree, right? If they want to go follow that full chain up, they can. And if they want to stop at any point and go out in the industry with that credential that they've earned, they can do that, and they can come back, and we see that a lot. With our continuing education, we've done a lot with the badging and the micro credentials, kind of like you're talking about. We leverage some of the existing certifications, especially in the area of cloud computing and cybersecurity. There's some great industry certifications. And so we can, if a student comes with the CompTIA Security Plus certification, we can look at that and say, okay, you don't need to take this course. You already have that material covered, and we're able to provide credit for that. And so help students along their degree path using these credentials that they have already earned, or, if they're wanting to avoid taking the course, well, go take this certification instead, right? Show that you have this knowledge, and then, yeah, we can get you through that requirement and on to the rest of your degree.
Yeah, I think that's insightful. Going back to the point that Dr. Adams made, one of the things that we find, if we go back to the thought of the course that had a 17 modules, then 18, then 19 modules, we end up in this position where we have a limited amount of time, and it's a conversation we have with industry all the time, is when the learning that you need to do expands so much, how do you fit more of it in when you only have a certain amount of time to commit to that? And I think one of the things that we always try to do with our platform, Pluralsight, is we try and give people options on how to test out of content. Learning a long course is fine, but if you can test out 5, 6, 7 hours of content on that course, then that obviously gives you more time to fit more relevant knowledge in. And I think it was interesting to hear you mention that, Dr. Adams.
Yeah, credit for prior learning, which we've both seen a lot of, and that's increasing. As a department chair, I see a lot of that, because I get students that want to come into a program and say, well, how do I test out of these courses? And it's, well, do you have these certifications? Because this course is going to get you ready for these certifications. If you can show me that you've done that in industry, you're going to get credit for that class. And we see more of that than we used to. It used to be it was onesies and twosies. Now it's several dozen a year that we see students trying to get credit for prior learning.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess when it comes to down to closing out this subject, or kind of rounding out this subject, there are going to be people on here that are listening to what you've done, and they're going to want to understand, a path forward, or potentially how they can take parts of that. So, Dr. Feuz, to you first, if you could give anybody one piece of advice to other institutions, other academic institutions to consider when it comes to designing programs around tech fluency and workforce readiness, what would be the one piece of advice you could give them?
If this is something you're considering, my recommendation would be to just go for it. Like, our approach is different than Utah Valley University's approach. It's different than other universities I've talked to. And that's okay. And our approach is even different than it was 5 years ago. So you don't have to do it the exact same way as anyone else. You don't have to get it perfect the first time. Just say, this is something we want to commit to. This is something we want to try, and jump in and say, okay, we're going to do it in this one course, or in this one program, or in this one university, right? Whatever your scope is, start there, give it a try, and then iterate and say, okay, what can we do better now that we've had some experience with this, and improve it as you go forward.
Yeah. Dr. Adams, your thoughts?
Oh, he's exactly right. I would emphasize exactly the same thing, that that's exactly how you'd want to do it. Just start somewhere and become agile. That's one thing that higher ed's not good at, is being agile and getting things changed quickly. I was trying to think if there was something I could add to that, but I think that is the main thing, is just getting going and doing something. It seems like it takes years before things tend to get, decisions are made at higher ed, and we can't do that. You've got to step in and just start doing. And that can be as simple as changing some modules out of the course and experimenting. So
yeah, that's I think, one of the most difficult things for organizations is you don't know what you don't know, so you don't really know where to start. I mean, going back to Dr. Fates and to you, Dr. Adams, you mentioned being agile and things like that. I think from what I'm hearing, one of the concepts that you're using to be successful is the concept that we use in industry, which is obviously fail fast. Try something, stand it up. If it doesn't work, quickly tear it down and go back again. So I guess knowing how resistant academic institutions can be to change, what were the biggest challenges you faced when you started to try and implement this tech fluency approach to your organization, at your university? Dr. Adams first.
let me go back to your previous one, and then I'll answer that.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I think the other thing I would advise is that look at your strengths. The reason that we've partnered with Pluralsight is we saw their strengths. And what was interesting is we started going down that path, we started to see our own strengths and weaknesses too. But we realized that that partnership there was synergy in it, and that by playing to both organizations' strengths, we could provide more to students. On that other question, the biggest challenge is getting faculty to realize what they need to do to keep up with this and to let go of traditional roles. That some of my faculty just want to be the sage on the stage, and they believe that they're in charge of all the content. And I'm sitting here standing, screaming, jumping up and down, saying, come on, you cannot keep up with this. You cannot keep up with what industry is doing. And I don't care if you're in business or engineering or where you're at, this stuff is proliferating so fast. The technologies are developing so rapidly. You've got to realize what you can and cannot do and stay up with it and teach it, but don't expect to be the one that's going to develop all this content. You cannot do it.
I think faculty buy-in is really key, and probably one of the biggest challenges we faced in getting this momentum behind this effort is getting that faculty buy-in, and it took time, right? It's some early adopters will start running with it, and then as others see, oh, that's actually working well, let's bring that into our courses too. And so just being consistent and building up that momentum, and pretty soon you get that faculty buy-in. Yeah.
And you always have your curmudgeons that don't ever want to do it, right? You have your crusty faculty that just don't want to change, but you get those 30% hopefully that are early adopters that really lead out, and then you get the other 70% or so, 60-70% that will go ahead and, oh, that looks great, I'm going to do that. They develop a comfort with it. And hopefully you don't have too many that fight it. That's where you have all your pain.
I can believe that. So, I mean, we've reached the Q&A section of the program. I guess, I'm looking for programs from the audience, and in the meantime, I guess we can carry on chatting while we wait for questions from the audience. But I would encourage people to ask questions. These are two folks that have actually trodden the path and developed these programs and have great insight into I guess what I would say partnering with industry to try and make everything more relevant for graduates as they go forward. So while we wait for questions, let me just ask you a couple of other questions perhaps while we wait. I think one of the things that I'd be really interested in knowing is, how do you identify and determine the essential tech skills and skill sets that students need to be workforce ready. So going back to your conversation, you said you get feedback from industry, you get feedback from graduates. Which of those influences you most, and how do you, obviously, Dr. Adams, you highlighted earlier on, hey, we've asked for this and we're asked for Python and we're asked for these things. And Dr. Feuz has already mentioned, there are 1,000 programming languages out there and everyone has their own favorites. So how do you actually manage to cut that down and say, these are critical, these are important, these are nice to have?
Well, just like Kyle, we look at our industry partners and we kind of look at it at separate industry sectors and say, okay, this one's mostly saying these programs, this one's saying this, where are the overlaps? And we kind of look at what's growing and what's fading. We've watched some of the spreadsheet programs over the years fade. So we know those are heading out, and we're also looking right now at artificial intelligence. We know that's blossoming. So we're looking at the platforms and the software and AI that look like they're going to be key in the future just by their growth. But I think we look at that fairly similarly, don't we, Kyle?
Well, our industry meetings, we do try and so like fall meeting, we'll break out into smaller groups and say, okay, everyone who's focused on big data, right, come join this group. Everyone who's focused on cybersecurity, come join this group. So we can kind of try and build some consensus within kind of subfields that we deal with in the School of Computing, and then bring that back and say, okay, how can we create some synergy here and make sure that we're teaching the technologies that we need to teach. As far as like prioritizing, I don't think there's we prioritize this over that. It's really just looking for synergy and balance and trying to figure out what's going to best serve our students' needs.
Okay, that's very useful. Thank you. We do have a question that's arrived. How have you addressed the challenges of meeting both quickly changing industry and student tech needs and the mandated state standards, which are incredibly slow to update and stay current?
Well, we haven't been too affected by the state mandates because we're not in the general ed mostly. If that makes sense. And there is kind of a state push towards technology fluency and industry preparation. So we definitely buy into that, and we're working on that really hard. But as far as some of the mandates, a lot of that is in the general ed area, and only a handful of our classes in the business school are GE courses.
Yeah, and we're fairly similar. We don't have a lot of gen ed courses. I think we have one course that falls under the gen ed category right now. The other place that we see state standards is in our concurrent enrollment. And so those have to align to state standards and to the high school curriculum. And so that can be a little bit of challenge of making sure that those stay up to date and current. But for the most part, at least in this, technology area, computer science, school computing type stuff, the standards are up to date enough and flexible enough that we're able to bring in kind of the latest technologies and changes and get those out to our high school partners and integrate it that way.
Yeah, if we stay up with the technology requirements of industry, we're probably going to be okay with the state standards, even if they're slow to adapt. That would be my guess. For the most part, that should solve that.
That's useful. Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. So we've got about 5 or 7 minutes left. If there's anything you want to address further that we've covered, that's fine. If there isn't, we can give people 5 minutes of their day back. It's entirely up to you. Either of you? If not,
I'm sure Kyle could fill the next 5 minutes. Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, academics, if you give us 5 minutes, we'll take 10. So no, if there's no additional questions, I'm happy to let people gain 5 minutes back to their day. And I appreciate the opportunity to come out here and share a little bit about what we've been doing and the great partnership we've had with Pluralsight. And it really has been a beneficial opportunity, both for our faculty as well as our students.
Well, and I appreciate it to get to know Kyle and Tony, but to see that what's developing on two different fronts, in a sense, we kind of spied on each other to see what each school's doing. But that's the kind of thing that's really healthy, that it helps us to know where we're on the right path and if we're doing the right things, because we're coming to some of the same conclusions and we end up doing similar things because that's kind of where we should be going. So I see why Pluralsight's strategically reaching out and trying to get embedded in more universities instead of trying to replace universities, to partner with them. I think that's a great strategy. And I know for us, it's a great strategy because for the very things that we've mentioned, that keeping our faculty up to date and offloading some of the workload that is unnecessary and not being redundant. So for many of these reasons and others, I think these are good partnerships.
That's outstanding, and thank you very much for those closing remarks. So everybody's going to get 5 minutes of their day back. I'd like to thank Dr. Feuz and Dr. Adams for their insights today. It's always interesting listening to people who are forging ahead with new ideas, and it's certainly something that we like to engage with. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the audience for attending. Thank you for the great questions from the audience. And I look forward to seeing you on another webinar soon. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.